Well, allow me to at least introduce Charlene. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Jen Castellani. I'm programs chair for our AFP chapter, and I'm really happy that you've all joined us this afternoon for this really important conversation. Charlene serves as our chapter's idea chair, and we're thrilled to have her because she certainly brings a wealth of knowledge in the DEI space. She's founded her own DEI consultancy firm. Prior to that, she worked in development, so she understands our world and the challenges that we face. And before she was working in development, she worked in the DEI space at several colleges and universities. So she's very well versed in this topic and of course understands fundraising. So Charlene, we're so happy that you put this panel together for us. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I forgot that I even did all that stuff. Like you get caught up in life, you forget that you did all of these things. So it is a pleasure to be here with you all today. Thank you so much. We are going to be talking about decolonizing philanthropy. Bum, bum, bum. We had a coffee and conversations chat about 2 weeks ago. That was a preliminary conversation to this particular webinar. And the reason for that was to get everyone acclimated to what decolonizing philanthropy even meant. At the time when we started our marketing, there were some questions about the term decolonization being a term that was very politicized at the time, has been very politicized at the time. And so we kind of want to demystify that and debunk that. But most importantly, we want to talk to people who are already engaging in this type of work so that you can walk away with some of these skills and trades and ways that we can start to infuse this into our everyday scope and not look at this as something that's extra, but something that's everyday practice. I have a wonderful panel here with me today, and I'm going to brag a little bit. We have 3 beautiful Black men who are going to be talking to us about decolonizing philanthropy, one from their scope and also from their lived experiences. So I want us to recognize that these are technical experts in decolonizing philanthropy, but they also bring that extra addition of lived experience to the work. So we are going to walk away with some jewels. I'll start off by introducing them to you. First up, we have Lebanos Mengistu, who is in strategic finance for Fundraise Up. Fundraise Up is an AI-powered digital donation platform, and Lebanos is in fintech, guys. He is the future. So please welcome Lebanos Mengistu, who graduated from Bates College, majored in politics and Africana studies. He's in finance, has worked for multiple financing corporations, and right now is leading the future of the digital dollar for the nonprofit space. So welcome, Lebanos. Next up, we have Vvdaul R. Holloway, who is a policy analyst for the Oregon Youth Authority in Salem, Oregon. Not only is this man a policy analyst, but he has worked for some of the heavy hitter foundations in this country. One, the Oregon Foundation in Portland, Oregon. Sorry, now you're in Salem, you were in Portland, Oregon. And then for the Rockefeller Foundation in Arkansas. So not only is he dope in that aspect, he also went to Little Rock High School, which is the first desegregated high school in the country. So like I said, guys, technical expertise and lived experience. He has made a professional investment in unpacking the intersection of social theory and inclusive policy through many years of research, data analysis, and lived experience. And his work has included a background in philanthropy, trust-based community engagement, and technical assistance. So I would love for you guys to please welcome Vvdaul Holloway. And lastly but not least, our beloved Ben Williams, who is the executive director of the Connect Center for Youth. And anyone who is tapped into the Capital Region knows that Ben is a beloved community pillar. Not only is he an ED, but he is also a preacher's son and sure acts like it, okay? He's a chef, has amazing trades, The kids love him, the people love him. And I mean, I've seen tons of corporations just throw money at him because the programs that he provides for our young people are, once again, the future. They are digital age ways to engage with our young people through gaming services, sports, cooking, culinary arts, you name it, the young people are doing it. And by the way, the space looks amazing. So really quickly, he was born to Reverend Wendell Williams, who passed down the Connect Center of Youth to him. And he was a visionary leader to breathe life back into its mission. It's during the challenging times of the global pandemic that Ben, driven by a profound sense of legacy, stepped into the role as the executive director. And with relentless determination, he resurrected the organization, adapted it to the new norm, and steered it towards unprecedented heights. And we are so proud of you, Ben. Welcome. All right, guys. So for today, I wanted to brag a little bit about these beautiful Black men. And I'm not trying to take up space. I want you guys to hear from them. I feel like they are amazing. They're going to bring a lot to you. I'm just going to recap from our coffee and conversations. Then we'll go into hearing from our panelists. And then we'll close out with some questions from everyone. Okay, so I hope that's all right for you all. Now, in our last conversation during Coffee and Colonization, we talked coffee and conversations. We talked about what is decolonizing philanthropy. And decolonizing philanthropy calls on people working in philanthropy to move away from the individualistic and transactional practices of rich people donating money to poor people. And instead, we adopt a culture of reciprocity, where mutual sharing and community are the core of financing social change. Now, this definition came from a founder of Decolonizing Philanthropy, and his name is Mr. Forgive me, I want to make sure I say it properly, Edgar Villanueva. Now, Edgar Villanueva coined the term decolonizing philanthropy and decolonizing wealth through his book that explores natural resources, cheap labor, tax evasion. What does it look like to decolonize philanthropy? And he also offers solutions. He talks about the basis of traditional philanthropy, that it preserves wealth, and that fundamental wealth that was preserved wasn't preserved in the ways in which they should be allocated to all people in the philanthropic sector. So we'll start to dissect that a little bit later, but I wanted to give you guys an overview of what he talks about is decolonizing philanthropy. Furthermore, decolonizing philanthropy is stated as a multifaceted approach, and it's aimed at challenging, dismantling colonial structures, ideologies, and power dynamics within the philanthropic sector. I'm going to say that again. Challenging, dismantling, colonial structures, ideologies, and power dynamics within the philanthropic sector. It also involves recognizing and addressing the historical legacies of colonization, imperialism, and exploitation that have shaped the philanthropic practices, policies, and priorities. Decolonizing philanthropy seeks to center the voices, needs, and self-determination of historically marginalized communities, particularly Indigenous peoples, Black, Brown, and other communities of color. At its core, decolonizing philanthropy acknowledges that traditional philanthropic models have often perpetuated inequities and reinforced hierarchical relationships between donors and recipients. It calls for a fundamental shift in perspective, moving away from paternalistic and top-down approaches towards a more equitable, participatory, and community-driven form of giving and decision-making. So I'm going to stop there. Do we have a full understanding? Did I talk too fast? Are there any questions right now? Are we good? All righty, now let's get into the panelists, because that's what we're here for. I'm not trying to hear me. You guys want to hear the panelists. So the panelists, feel free to take off your mic if you'd like. This is going to be conversation style. I had some questions to ask you guys if you had any that you like best, and you guys said we're fair game. So I'm going to start off with, let's see, Vvdaul. Can you share your personal journey and experiences in philanthropy? And what motivated you to go into philanthropy?
Yeah, wow. It was 2020. I was running Black student programs at Portland State University. And I don't know if y'all remember the news cycle back then, but Portland was like major in that protest scene.
Mhm.
And I was really trying to figure out what could I be doing to support the Black community that was not being uplifted in the ways that I thought it really should be in a center of a white supremacist state that was ramping up white supremacist policies. And it was wild, y'all. I found myself questioning the big question in education, which is the budget. There's always a great idea, but a budgetary restriction. And I got frustrated. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go find the money. Y'all say there's resources available. I'm going to, put boots to the ground and really figure it out. And I found that there was the community foundation who was hosting $1 million portfolio dedicated to Black student success. And it was everyone from Nike, Adidas, all these national donors were pouring money into this one centralized space. And I was like, whoa, who gets access to that? Why haven't I heard about this? I'm working for the community. And so I found that philanthropy held a lot of power in decision making about accessibility. And I wanted in on that conversation. And so really that was my transition to the work, was wanting to find ground level solutions to problems I saw that I could not antagonize from the positions I'd held previously.
Mm. Thank you so much for that, Vvdaul. Anyone else want to tackle this?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here, Charlene. I think for me, my journey, my personal journey with philanthropy really started when at a very young age. Being an African immigrant, we often see a lot of US money and US aid money flow into the region, into Ethiopia specifically, especially during the time when I was young there. And this conversation of the money is coming in, but the impact is not felt on the ground was very topical. And I think this is still the case today as we see it across the world. And, grew up with these narratives all around. So as I continue to grow, progress through life and through my education and my career now, these questions are still at the heart of what I want to find out. And so that's really my passion for really understanding philanthropy and, taking it a step further in the steps that I take in the organizations that I've worked with and built. And this is something that will definitely stay with me for the rest of my life. And, we'll continue to untangle these because it's not one stale thing, but it's changing time over time, situation over situation.
I love that you said topical, right? It is. It's like a cream that you put on. It's supposed to penetrate your skin, but next thing you know, 30 minutes later, for those of us, you get ashy again. And you're like, wait, hold on. I thought this was a lotion. I'm confused. That is exactly what I felt as well when I started to think about philanthropy. I worked with an organization that had a mission to dismantle anti-racism, but they did nothing to do so. And so I wondered, all of these hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants that you got, but you're not doing anything related to anti-racism work. So I'm a little confused. Let's dig a little bit deeper. And didn't I get a big target on my back? But hey, it was worth it to me, right?
Right.
Ben, what's up with you, Ben? Can you share your personal journey?
Yeah, I mean, my journey started early. I remember my dad bringing me to bowl-a-thons for Big Brothers Big Sisters when I was little. And he was a big, and he modeled that throughout my life, especially with my involvement in the church. We were always feeding people or helping people, figuring out ways to give back. A lot of people think that philanthropy just has to do with money, but it's more than that. It's, giving of your talent and your time as well. So we call those the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. So if you ain't got one, give something that you do have. It just was ingrained in me early and really kind of accelerated, much like Vvdaul, like during the pandemic. I had already started working on the Connect Center project, but once the pandemic hit, we were really able to respond to the needs of the community. So in my area, the kids in my school district didn't have Chromebooks for a long time. And then when they did get Chromebooks, they were really slow to roll them out. So they did one per family to all the families, which is super problematic if you have multiple children in the household. So we were able to open our doors, and I got somebody to donate internet, and I found a whole bunch of computers, got those donated from GE, and we opened our doors and let the kids come in and do their schoolwork and homework and work on resumes, all like socially distanced and stuff. So that was kind of our first digital equity type program that we worked on, and we're still working with digital equity through our floss program. So we still get those donated computers from GE. We teach the kids the components, how to fix them up, how to troubleshoot them, and then we give them to them for free at the end of the session. So, you know, we're putting machines in the community, we're empowering the community. Yeah, it's just been a lifestyle, and it just really, really accelerated during COVID.
Topical lifestyle. So as a practitioner, you hear folks say, well, I feel like DEI is extra work. Decolonizing philanthropy is extra work. Ben said something very important. This becomes a lifestyle. This is just the way you do your work. You don't look at this as an extra component. It's a lens that you develop over time. I'm pretty sure, Ben, not to put you on the spot, but when you were providing those grassroots services just to serve your community, you didn't know it was called digital equity. You didn't have a word for it at the time. It wasn't until you went and you had to connect the work to the donors, right? And the ideologies of those donors, then you had to name it digital equity.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't.
But yeah, I had to learn all that stuff, to your point. You know, so for reference, before I entered the nonprofit world, I was a chef. So I call myself a recovering chef now. But once I get into the nonprofit game, you know, I started to learn about keywords and about development and becoming a development professional. And I really love it now because, you know, like I think Vvdaul said before, where there's no money, there's no mission. So you got to have the dollars coming in order to serve the community. And it really, when I figured that out, it really helped me asking for money because it felt awkward at first. But you know, it's not me asking for money, like it's the organization, and it's not for me, it's for the community. So those things really like opened my eyes when I started to learn about, you know, what the things were and what I was doing. And like this decolonizing work is like, it's not a lens, it's not a choice, it just is. Like it should be, is. DEI work shouldn't be extra, it should just be the way you work.
I love it. Takes me into our next question. Because I think so many jewels just popped up for me, and I'm a facilitator, so I'm ready to teach, but you guys are the panel, so let you answer. The next question is, I'm going to ask you, Ben, since you're already talking, and then we can go down the panel to Lebanos and Vvdaul. How do you define decolonizing philanthropy, and why do you believe it's important?
I mean, decolonizing philanthropy just really involves, you know, rethinking and restructuring the power structure, like you were saying before. You know, our sector is part of the industrial power complex in America. When I learned that I was just part of the big wheel, I almost vomited. But you know, it's a unique opportunity to break that cycle, to break the larger cycle, and we do that by creating opportunity, getting seats at the table, you know, explaining the narrative of what's going on in our culture and our community, impacting equitable funding practices, you know, to make sure that these rich people aren't just giving to the poor people through their traditional models, but educating them on where to give and how to give and the types of long-term support that's needed, not just, you know, short window grants or programmatic grants, really pushing the narrative that there needs to be long-term investment in the community to see any sustainable change. I could ramble all day, but yeah, that's what it means to me in short.
Thank you. Lebanos?
Yeah, absolutely. I think very well said, Ben. I would very much agree with you. I would just add one more thing there. There's a lot of unlearning that we need to do as well, right? About the idea of philanthropy and what it meant yesterday versus what it means today. So that's a point that I would definitely add. And then in addition to that, I think it's also important, you know, to think about the funds that are being received, whether to a large organization or a small one. Again, I go back to the idea of, are these funds supporting the communities that they're intended for, right? So there's a lot of practices around that and adjacent to that, you know, we always have to keep an eye out for. And so those are a couple of things that I would add there, but very much agreed, Ben.
Thank you, Lebanos. Vvdaul.
I mean, I think my brothers covered it. I would just add the point of additionally from unlearning, it's about being in a space of being willing to practice new engagement models and test the waters and sit in that discomfort. Because I think of a lot of the times we can be okay with theorizing and sitting around and saying we're giving people seats at the table, when in reality, sometimes people are sitting to destroy that table, flip it, move some seats around. The table shouldn't exist at all. And so being okay with formulating that idea and then understanding what that means for your organization, because truth be told, maybe it's not the way that you are sending money out. Maybe it's the way you're bringing money in that's the problem. Maybe it's your donor base to begin with. And so if you're not comfortable with changing the way that you operate top down, you are not ready to engage in decolonization from the bottom. That'll just be what I'll add.
I just want to give 2 snaps. Feel like I'm in the New Yorican cafe right now, because one of the things that I have experienced in the philanthropic space at the higher education level is this notion of donors and the donors dictating where and when the money gets dispersed. And if we were providing services or, you know, looking to expand an emergency fund or things of that nature, and there were predominantly students of color who would be benefiting, there was an additional layer of language that had to be used because there was a conversation around us turning donors off from donating because we were specifically looking to provide services for students of color at these particular within these particular higher education institutions. Furthermore, when I was in development at a organization that had a mission to dismantle or had an anti-racism mission, they had donors who were in fact racist, but they didn't want to stop those donations, although their mission was anti-racism. I could not get my mind around it. And much like Ben, I wanted to vomit in my mouth, right? Because I'm just like, does this make any sense? Imagine folks donating to your organization and they don't align with your mission. That is, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, these are not the opinions of the panelists, not all money is good money. Yes, girl. That to me is a clear indication that the green dollar is more important than your integrity and the mission and the goals. It becomes even more topical at that point. So I thank you all for sharing those layers of how we engage donors, how we engage the community. Vvdaul, I just want to ask you one quick question, because a part of your bio is that you have a background in philanthropy, trust-based community engagement, and then you have your technical assistance. Can you please elaborate a little bit more on trust-based community engagement, because I believe that comes from Decolonizing Philanthropy, correct? It's a tentacle. Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. So the whole idea of trust-based community connections or trust-based philanthropy, I don't know how that reverberates in your particular community, but the idea is really flipping that traditional model of philanthropy on its head and asking the organizations that you aim to serve, what is it that they need? So if that's general operating support, change the way you put out your RFPs. If that's technical assistance, find ways to support that beyond the dollar. Because sometimes an organization may need something like a grant writer, and you have this complicated process that they can't navigate, and you've done nothing but create an obstacle to someone that you're aiming to help. And so with trust-based philanthropy, it's about really examining your internal processes and vetting the way your organization engages with community organizations. And one of the biggest ways that you can really do that is going to the people, sitting with those organizations and learning what it is they actually do. You would be surprised how many philanthropic organizations get applications and they just go with the visible names that they're comfortable with or that they recognize. And they have no idea that someone's sitting in their community doing similar work. And so that's part of trust-based philanthropy, is being okay with the way what do we call it, vet or look at what organizations are deemed worthy of this dollar that we're putting out there, and really understanding that doing the work and testing whether or not someone is viable are not always exclusive conversations. Sometimes we need to be in the space of saying this grassroots organization is trying something new that we've never heard of. Let's invest in that model and see where we can take it, instead of, oh, this big national organization that has no connection to our community that we're comfortable with. So again, trust-based, it's a conversation around practice and policy and the way you engage with communities in the work.
Thanks,
As
Vvdaul.
scrunching it together real quick.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And I think that Ben touched on another layer of this. So where you can gather more information about this is learning about the nonprofit industrial complex. The complex was built for us to, not us, for those who are allocating resources to provide those resources to organizations who have long-lasting and established names. And so a barrier is a grassroots organization would have a harder time accessing funding because of this ideology that Vvdaul just shared. So the trust-based philanthropy is a way to disrupt that. That's another decolonizing tactic. So thank you so much, Vvdaul. Another cool decolonizing tactic that I would love for you all to hear about, because this is amazing, and I've been sharing it with a few people, is the organization that Lebanos works for. It's called Fundraise Up. Lebanos, can you talk to us a little bit about how Fundraise Up has removed barriers for those grassroots organizations in the complex, and how you see that as a decolonizing tactic?
Absolutely. So Fundraise Up, as Charlene mentioned, is a nonprofit tech donation platform that boosts revenue for any, platform, any nonprofit that works with us. And it is, when you're using some of these donation pages or sites or things of that nature, for the most part, there's a hefty fee that, the organization needs to pay that they might not be able to afford, right? So what Fundraise Up does is, really rooted in our mission of supporting the organization. It's the idea of when you win, we win, right? So it's not based on a contract that you sign or things of that nature. The more successful you are, the more successful we are together. And, this in turn allows more nonprofits of any size, right? You could just be starting out, or you could be UNICEF, right? We have a whole range of clients, and UNICEF is actually one of our clients. And we also have very, very small organizations that work with us, that do $1,000 in revenue or in donations a year. And Fundraise Up really provides access to that whole range of nonprofits, which I think is amazing and kind of evens out the playing field in a sense.
It definitely does. As someone who's connected to hundreds of nonprofits across this country, Lebanos knows, as soon as a nonprofit gets a whiff of this particular platform, they can see barriers falling away. One, sending the tax documents at the end of the year. Now your donors have a portal that they can sign into, and they print out their tax documents on their own. Another thing is having multiple ways to pay. This centralizes that process instead of having it decentralized across your pages. There are different ways that the AI allows for you to turn one-time donors into monthly donors. Now, these are all the different ways that us as fundraising professionals will go out into the field and create these specific networks, come back, input all of this data into our platforms or softwares that we're spending thousands of dollars on, that don't necessarily allow for us to utilize them unless we log into them, right? Fundraise Up does most of this work for you, and then you get data in a portal on the back end. So this is helping organizations across the nation, across the globe, because it is a global platform, and it's moving organizations into the digital donation space. So now I'm not only having to compete for grants, whether they are corporate, whether they are federal or state grants. Now I can compete for crowd surfing. I can compete for people who care about my mission, and that's unrestricted funding that I can utilize to address my operations needs or address my grant making needs. So it really is a space where folks are able to remove some of those barriers that we see from the organizational perspective. And then we can diversify what our donor landscape looks like, and also diversify where our funding comes from. So thank you for that, Lebanos. I'm a big fan of Fundraise Up. I sound like I'm doing a commercial, but I love decolonizing. I feel like we think about it, like Ben said, it's only money, but it could be a platform. It could be in-kind donations. It could be, just the way we're thinking about the work. So Ben, talk to us a little bit about how you've been working. Okay, when I met you, Ben, you were technically grassroots, right? It was just you and your board. And since then, you've been able to expand exponentially, which everyone knew, but you had some barriers along the way. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you communicate with other EDs that have been in your space, and or the ones who are backed by big machines, to understand the dynamics of a grassroots organization with a Black leader who's dealing with nonprofit industrial complex, as well as colonization of philanthropy? What does that look like for you in the intersections? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very panthery approach, honestly, kind of like know your enemy type of thing. My first barrier, like I was talking about earlier, was education. I had to learn. I had to learn the dynamics of the sector, the dynamics of the power structure within the sector, key players, where the money is, where the money isn't. Like I was also learning how to run an organization at the same time. So, I mean, that was my first major hurdle. And my second hurdle was, all right, now that I've identified who's who and what's what, how do I move that needle? And a lot of what I did was through storytelling. So a lot of my build out and infrastructure projects over COVID, and also the digital equity stuff I was doing, I was just documenting it on Facebook, on Instagram, just telling my story. Everything from overflowing water pipes to, I need new TVs and Nintendos for the kids, stuff like that. But storytelling really helped me to amplify those marginalized voices, right? To show their experience in the community, to show their perspective. It really helps me to make sure that, people can get seen and heard. It built a lot of empathy and understanding with my donor base. So I was able to cultivate that mission-aligned donor base right from the get-go. I've definitely turned down bad money, but by turning down the bad money and building my donor base from the get, it just really gave us a solid foundation to grow. And we've only just really scratched the surface, to be honest with you. There's so much more that we could do that we're working towards like realizing now. But storytelling, it also really helps hold other donors accountable, right? So when you're transparent and honest, those philanthropic organizations that want to engage with your organization have to come with it, right? They have to show that they're really about what they're talking about and really about what you're talking about. So that storytelling through social media was everything. It was also awesome because I didn't have any money for marketing. It was just like I had to do what I had to do to figure it out. But yeah, that was kind of my story on how to like really get going, and some of the barriers that I'm facing now are more the trust barriers, that Vvdaul was saying earlier. Now that I've gotten my name out there, they want to see if I'm really like made of what I'm saying I'm made of. So, doing, donor engagement stuff, donor retention stuff, being a good steward of the foundations and the organizations that are giving me money. It is really frustrating when it's hyper focused money. I really need operating expenses, so that sort of thing comes with trust. So some of these organizations that are giving me hyper focused money, it's really like vetting. It's just a test. Like once I can pass that barrier, their wallets open up, and that's starting to happen to me now. I have some organizations that are like, all right, you did it, cool, let's give you some money. And other organizations are still timid, like white founded, white run organizations. They still don't all the way understand or get it. Some of them want to, and some of them are just doing it because it's their job and they have to hit certain numbers and stuff. That's okay with me as long as it's not racist. It's gotta I can take their money and help the community. But yeah, so those are some of the things that I'm facing now. And I'm looking forward to the next level of challenges too. I like problem solving a lot. That's kind of my
Thank you so much, Ben. So you touched on a couple of our questions, and guys, one of our questions is about storytelling and narrative, but I want to get to that a little bit later because I really want to talk about in what ways does traditional philanthropic practices perpetuate colonial structures and perpetuate inequities. And I really want us to take a hyper focus on what Ben was just sharing with us about his lived experiences. For those of us in the audience, not the panel, think about what he was saying. And as the panel starts to answer these questions, I really want you to take it in as fact. These are not ideologies. These are not things that people are making up on the fly. These are real occurrences that are happening in the philanthropic space. And if you can identify them, then you can disrupt them. So I'll re-ask the question to the panel. Whoever wants to take the question first can. In what ways do traditional philanthropic practices perpetuate colonial structures and perpetuate inequities?
I'll jump in. Charlene, I really appreciate that you cemented that point of that lived experience that Ben was speaking about. I really want to harp on that as well. These, again, like you said, these aren't ideas, these are real lived experiences. So just cementing that there. But to answer your question, this is definitely a loaded question, and there's so many different ways that this happens, right? So there isn't one right answer. I think there are tons of right answers based off of lived experiences. But ultimately, when I think of this, what comes to mind is this idea of performative philanthropy and what that means in the space, right? So who are we giving money to, and do we truly believe in the cause? Whether you are Bill Gates of the world or whether you are an average Joe, right? Like the money that you are giving, do you care about where that money is going, or are you doing that to fulfill a need that you have internally, right? So I think sticking with that mission and being fully invested in where those funds go, and it again, Ben reminded us at the beginning that this isn't just about the money that you give. It could be the time, the energy that you give to these things. And so I think that that's one way to look at it, right? So being fully invested is really important. And I think time over time, we see a lot of like larger orgs or individuals give funds or their time and not really be connected to that mission. And I think that takes away and perpetuates this cyclical pattern of philanthropy not going the way that we expect it to, right? Meaning being rooted in the mission and continuing and seeing that through. I think that's one of the ways that I would say. And just to add on to that a bit more, I think I would also say the lack of decision making in this from those who are receiving the funds or time or energy is also another piece of this that is often ignored, right? Like you can receive the funds, but if they're not going to things that matter to you and are going to support you, did we really do our job as a philanthropy, as an organization? And I think both of these points, just to pick two out of the many that exist, are ideas and concepts that perpetuate and keep the cycle going.
New Eurekan.
And I'm gonna take what you said, brother, and take it a step further and name that as a white savior complex that poisons the idea of philanthropy at its roots in this country. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in having these conversations is not aligning the fact that a lot of these big name donors have funding from questionable resources that were never meant to serve communities that we at the bottom want to serve and uplift to begin with. It's a question of systemic oppression and the ways that we allow monetization of that system to impact communities of color specifically. And I will say that colonial structures are replicative and they're poisonous because they are evolving. So to the point that Lebanos just made, what happens when your organization is performative in its actions? Well, now you get to align yourself and appear in allyship with something that you don't actually support. And that gives you power to then dictate how funding gets spent in a space that you want to control and maybe minimize anyway. So if we're looking at ways of colonial power, colonial kind of just rulemaking, that top-down approach that philanthropy traditionally holds is a space we should always be questioning. And I say, even if we want to be in a trust-based space, allowing those who are at the power deficit to define what that trust means. Because even in the conversation of trust-based philanthropy, we're still kind of allowing that power dynamic to dictate that relationship. And so always being in a space of questioning the value of being in power and what system is being impacted by that power. And again, I'll just say it, a lot of the times with philanthropy, it is the white savior complex that is a relic of a lot of isms that exist globally, but specifically in the American context, it's pervasive because we knew that it existed when we created the systems and we allowed ourselves to continue to operate from that space for hundreds of years to the point of even saying those words makes people uncomfortable when they're factual statements that people feel weird about. And so I just want to throw that out there as my response to that question.
Ben, you want to take a hack at this? or I'll give you some time because I also have a quote from Edgar Villanueva.
Yeah, go ahead with your quote.
So Edgar was asked, excuse me, you bring a lot of your own experience and the experiences of your colleagues. What are some of the things you have found from Native people and people of color working in the field? And he said, the culture of foundations is a strong white dominant culture. It seems extra prevalent within philanthropy because you're dealing with a lot of extra privilege beyond just a typical white organization. There is an expectation that you assimilate. On one hand, they want you because of who you are and what you represent, but they do not want to make accommodations for how you might do work differently or offer a different type of perspective. Anyone who really begins to shine as a leader, especially because they're pushing back and bringing alternative perspectives, immediately becomes a target of push out or dismissal. The culture of white supremacy is so strong and so pervasive that you literally have to forsake your culture and everything that you're about in order to get by. I felt like what Lebanos said and what Vvdaul said is wrapped up in this pretty bow with what Edgar just shared, having coined decolonizing wealth and philanthropy. So I just wanted to leave that there because as we go into Ben's response, Ben, I'm not trying to say that you're leaving your culture behind and you're forsaking your culture. I'm not saying that at all. But we also have to recognize that even if you are a white person who is trying to decolonize philanthropy within your organization, you will experience this as well. And when you get this pushback, how are you going to use your privilege? Is the question. Am I going to back down because now I'm a target? Or am I going to continue because I believe in the decolonizing of philanthropy, because I believe that we are in a topical space? I believe that we haven't actually gotten to dismantling white saviorism. I believe that there are organizations out there that need operating funding and they are not getting it because we don't trust them. But when a white organization who is also grassroots comes into the conversation, no one questions whether or not they're trustworthy. These are the things that we need to continue to think about. They're not ideologies, they're facts, they actually happen. So go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I definitely, the cycle can never be broken all at once. It takes repetition. The cycle wasn't created all at once. It was built. So tearing it down takes bricks. And I just think that starting to build our communities, taking the money and starting to build the communities is a great way to fight against this colonialistic cycle. I'm literally taking money and putting it into Black and brown hands and accelerating their exit out of poverty. And in America, that's the best way to fight capitalism, is to create equality, to fight the traditional paternalism that's been going on in our society. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now we have about 9 minutes left and I have tons of questions for the panelists, but I want to open up the floor for you all to ask questions because I feel, see, Jen's hand went up. So how about you just raise your hand? Let's talk to the panelists. You guys can ask as many questions as you like until we close out. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, so Ben, thank you for bringing up capitalism because I feel like I exist in a perpetual state of cognitive dissonance. Like as a fundraiser, my whole profession exists because of capitalism. And I go out and I talk to wealthy people and I ask for funds so that I can help those who don't have that kind of income. And I just am constantly like just in this state of conflict around how do I make this more equitable, and how do I reframe maybe, like, I like to, I mean, I think my background, a lot of my background is in higher education fundraising. And so, I kind of thought of it a little bit like I'm out there raising money for scholarships so that deserving students can get a great education that they might not have otherwise been able to receive. I'm like, it's kind of like academic socialism. Like, yeah, I'm gonna take from the rich and I'm gonna help others. Like, but is that a problematic framework? And if it is, like, how do I don't even know if I'm making any sense, but this is just like what is constantly like in my brain as I work with wealthy people every day.
I think a lot of what needs to happen is the education piece too. A lot of wealthy are very disconnected from what's happening in the community. So educating them, amplifying their voices, or amplifying community voices, and educating them about what's actually going on and what the actual needs are, can help kind of move that needle. It can help kind of dismantle some of these traditional structures. A lot of what we deal with some of these donors is a lot of those bureaucratic barriers, the extra paperwork, the extra this, the extra that, the super focused funding, the restrictive funding, where there just needs to be an understanding and a trust that's built with a community organization, so there can be free flowing funds. And I think the education piece is very big at the beginning.
Anyone else?
I'd like to just kind of respond to that as someone who was in a similar space in higher ed, really trying to figure out the donor piece. And like Ben said, that donor engagement model has to come from a space of education. And I say that as when you're engaging with donors, is your conversation that Robin Hood model of, hi, I'm in this space to raise donor funds for the purpose of recommitting these dollars to the students who I see in this space? Or is it, hi, I'm here to raise funds on behalf of this organization? Like, what is your way of entering that conversation? And then being, again, okay with educating the donor, because sometimes the wealth in the community is still separated from the needs of that community. So when you're engaging donors and you're bringing them into the foundations, trying to push them into the unrestricted funding categories, try to push them into those gen op spaces, because maybe normally they just heard that their other rich friends start a fund for their county or whatever the specific thing is in higher ed that they're doing a scholarship for. That's cute, that's helpful, that's wonderful. Now let's push them to be more critical and say, well, this county gets a lot of resources. What does it look like to go into those rural spaces? Would you like to visit one of those spaces and engage, like change the way that we engage donors for the purpose of changing the way they re-engage their dollars?
Just one thing to add here, I agree with both of my brothers here, but one thing to add, just putting on my finance hat, using the approach that, Vvdaul and Ben have discussed, I would also argue the more the folks who are donating understand the mission, the more likely they are that their revenue is recurring or their donations are recurring. So there's also definitely a long-term play in that understanding, I would argue.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
I just want to hop off and say, what a fire panel. Not me stumbling upon this, seeing my partner in good, Ben, on here. I'm really gagged. The girl is gagged. And also like feeling really reassured, because a lot of these practices you guys are saying, coming into my new org, that's like the direction I'm in. I don't take money from anybody. I don't let anybody see our girls or be around our girls so they could feel better about themselves. Like, I'm coming from, I don't play that mindset. And I think that people are kind of like coming on board with that of like, oh, I don't need to go touch the girls to feel like I'm giving to the girls. We're Girls Inc. You know you're giving to the girls. So, but I just enjoyed this so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amari.
Any other questions for the panel? Well, panel, I just want to give you guys an opportunity to leave us with any final thoughts as we all depart into our day, the second half of our day. We have 3 minutes, so each one of you can get a minute or 30 seconds. What are you leaving us with? This is harder than the actual question.
Vvdaul, I think you got it. You can kick it off.
Anyone can start.
I'll hop in.
Okay.
So I just want to always leave people with the idea that words have meaning. So intentionalize the way you engage in conversations, and just know that the power of changing the way you speak about a situation can really alter your outcomes. So I say that from a space of DEI, but I say that from a space of faith as well. Honor thy tongue and really speak that this work is possible and it's plausible. And I promise you, it's doable. It's hard, but we out here, there's support, and just do the work.
I think for me, I want to thank you guys all for being here. I think acknowledging your presence is a big thing for me, because you are here because you want to learn more and seeking more knowledge to implement in your lifestyles, and leading your orgs in the way that you seek to in the future is really, really important. So I would continue to say, keep asking questions, I'm continuing to learn every day. We're all continuing to learn every day. And I think that hat should never come off, especially when it comes to decolonizing philanthropy, but decolonizing more generally.
Yeah, absolutely. That I was going to say education, know your enemy. We're really out here in these streets fighting evil, so you got to know who you're fighting, how to succeed, and how to operate. You just educate yourself top to bottom continuously all the time.
Thank you guys, everyone. It has been a pleasure to be able to present these beautiful Black men to you who are experts in their fields, have lived experiences, are kind, loving, giving back to their communities, and they're literally here as people who you have access to should you need anything. I know Lebanos, Vvdaul, and Ben are open, and they are really about this work. So we are all connected all over this country. So please, please, please reach out to them. Vvdaul, Lebanos, Ben, how do we get in contact with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Ben Williams Connect Center. I'll drop my email address in the chat.
Same
I just
here.
dropped my email in the chat, but also, Charlene, if anyone needs to contact me, you know the thousands of ways to find me. So hit up Charlene and she got you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to our panelists. You guys have been amazing. I learned so much, even in this short period of time. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. If there's anything that you need, reach out to these brothers. They are here for you. I'm here for you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you to the education team at AFP Mohawk, Hudson. And it has been a pleasure to be with you for this webinar. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Wait, before everyone leaves, can everyone smile or do something fun? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. I got to shout you out on LinkedIn.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, everyone. Be blessed.
Bye.
Megan, I guess you could stop recording it.